Over the years, WWE has preferred to wait until Friday to announce their latest mass wave of talent releases. It's the reason why a lot of times you'll hear if there's bad news that a company or the government, or if there's any bad news to share, they wait until Friday, the Friday news dump. Heading into the weekend, less people paying attention. It's no different with WWE. That's why we've seen so many of these mass waves of talent releases. We usually find out about them when it happens at the end of the week. Hence Black Friday. They've also tended to do some spring cleaning with the roster coming out of WrestleMania. I don't think they've done it the last few years. It was definitely more of a thing under Vince McMahon. But just because Vince McMahon is gone does not mean that you do not see mass, and you will not see mass waves of releases, right? It's still a corporation. There's still always going to be people that get cut, and there's never really a good time for that to happen. This year, they decided to do it before WrestleMania. And it always sucks to see people lose their jobs, but I can't sit here and tell you that any of these names are shocking to me. In most cases, the company just clearly was not going to do anything with them. You know, they weren't involved in any ongoing storylines, or at least none that were important. Here's the list as it currently stands, and I am recording this on Sunday morning. It's always possible more names could be added in the coming days or later today. I mean, who knows? And these names are in no particular order, but these are all names that are no longer with WWE. Sonya Deville, actually, technically, they're all still technically with WWE, okay? Because if you hear about a wrestler getting released early from their contract, let's just clarify this. And you see them go on social media, as many of them did this week, and they mention see you in 90, or they have their 90 days. That's their 90-day non-compete, right? It's not really so much a non-compete as it is a notice from the company that they plan to get rid of you 90 days from now. So you're still technically under contract to them for that period. You're being paid, right? You're getting your downside guarantee, whatever that number is. But it's a notice like, hey, in 90 days, you're going to be out of here. Unless your deal expires. Now, if your contract expires, then you can do whatever the hell you want. I mean, your contract could expire on a Tuesday. And if you wanted to, and Tony wanted you, Tony Khan can say, hey, come on over to Dynamite. You could pop up on their TV show the next day. So that's the difference between these two things. But Sonya Deville is going to be exiting WWE later this month when her deal expires. After having just hit her 10-year anniversary there, she joined the company in 2015. And she was informed that they will not be renewing her deal. And she was just on the news here in New York. She was on Pix 11 News the day before the Royal Rumble, talking about the women's division. But once her deal is up, she would be free and cleared to wrestle anywhere she wants, because, again, she would not be bound by any 90 days. She came out of Tough Enough, even though she didn't win. She not only did she not win, she wasn't like the runner-up or anything. But she came out of Tough Enough. They signed her to a contract. She spent some time in NXT, and then she formed a partnership with Mandy Rose. And eventually they split. They wrestled each other at SummerSlam, which is still the biggest match of her career. She lost that match and went away for a while. I think that was around the time she was dealing with that crazed stalker psychopath fan who tried to break into her house and kidnap her. And God knows what else he would have done to her. It's possible she wouldn't even be here today. I mean, this guy was, he was off his rocker. And I think he's locked away now for the next 15 years. It just doesn't feel long enough. So she had to go away for a while, but she came back and played an authority figure role on Smackdown as the assistant to Adam Pearce. And she was pretty good in the role. She had a very short run as one half of the women's tag team champions with Chelsea Green before she tore her ACL. And she was out for almost a year. And she came back, and that's when Pure Fusion Collective was formed with Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark, which never took off. It was a faction fail. I'm not going to sit here now because this woman is gone and tell you, Pure Fusion Collective, what will we do without PFC? PFC was no good. Okay, as a faction, it didn't work. Nobody cared. They didn't get any reactions. And so it was a faction fail. That's why I call it a faction fail. And I think what really did her in was that bad match that she had on Raw last summer with Io Sky. not going to sit here and tell you it was the worst match I've ever seen, like not even close. But if you can't have a good match with Io Sky, right? I'm just saying it's probably not Io's fault. And it's pretty clear that it did her no favors because that was the last time we saw her in the ring in a singles match on Monday Night Raw. After that, it was all tags. So you can draw a straight line, okay, from one to the other. You don't need to be a fly on the wall in the back to know that that match did not do her any favors. And oddly enough, she was eliminated from the Women's Royal Rumble last weekend by Io Sky, which I'm sure was just a coincidence. She just hasn't been the same since she came back. Just something was off in her matches. It was like she regressed, and I don't know if it had to do with the injury or what, but it wasn't good. And I don't know what she wants to do. I don't know if she wants to work indies or not, but I'm not sure what else WWE could have done with her outside of a managerial role, or keeping her as maybe a manager for Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark, who were together before PFC, doing a tag team, and I'm sure they'll just continue to do what they were doing before. They should be fine, at least for now. But yeah, I'm not sure what else WWE could have done with her because it's not like that role, that authority figure role that she had. That was several years ago. They have 2 authority figures now. Actually, every show has a GM now, and they're doing well in those roles, right? Nick Aldis and Adam Pearce. So honestly, I'm just not sure what else they could have done with her. On the other hand, there's Blair Davenport, who was also released. The former and now soon to be once again Bea Priestley had a nice little run in NXT, actually NXT UK and then NXT, before being drafted to Smackdown. And she made her first appearance in June. And in the time since then, she has had a grand total of 5 matches on TV. Now, it's hard for me to sit here and say, well, she wasn't really adapting well to the main roster when you have such a small sample size to go by. 5 fucking matches. I don't recall any of her matches being egregiously bad. Right? They started that little story with her and Naomi, but very quickly abandoned it, and that was it for her. That was it. As far as creative ideas, that was it. She never had a real chance to show what she could do. She never had a real chance to, sink or swim on her own. And I just don't understand the logic in calling someone up if you do not have a plan on how to use them. Stop calling people up without having a clear plan for what you want to do with them. You can't say, well, they had a need at the time to fill a hole in the division because someone went down with an injury and they didn't have enough women. Because if they needed more people in the division, they would have used her, right? We would have seen her more than fucking 5 times in the last 9 months. And they didn't. If they called her up and she was having terrible matches and cutting terrible promos and just not connecting with the audience, that would be one thing. Like a square peg in a round hole. But that wasn't the case here. It's like Dijak. When he got called up, and it might have been in that same draft, actually. When he got called back up from NXT, he knew right away. He said, I knew right away. I was fucked. It's literally what he said. I'm fucked. And he was. Because I think it was maybe a month and a half later, his contract was expiring and it wasn't renewed. So he was gone. Right? He had a good thing going down there at NXT. And as soon as he got drafted to Raw, that was the beginning of the end. I just don't understand it. Why even bother drafting someone if you're just going to let their contract expire 6 weeks later? But per Fightful Select, sources within WWE Creative indicated that there were no substantial creative plans for Davenport until mid-January. She was pitched to join Chelsea Green and Piper Niven's group, and there was movement on that front, but it didn't happen. Now, on Friday night, there were a bunch of different women who came up to Chelsea in the back in a backstage segment, and they were teasing coming after her in her U.S. title. Right? Michin, B-Fab, Zelina Vega then walked up to her, and Chelsea turned to Piper and made the comment about, we need a bigger security detail. So it sounds like they had, or have, some kind of plan to expand that little group, But those plans no longer involve Blair Davenport, who held multiple titles in Stardom and spent quite a few years in Japan. I'll be curious to see if she heads back there or if she ends up getting a look somewhere else. Isla Dawn is gone. One half of the former women's tag team champions with Alba Fire literally only won the titles because of where the show was being held that night. They gave her and Alba a nice little moment to remember in their home country at Clash at the Castle last year in Scotland. It's the only reason they won those titles. She posted on Instagram, "Here for a good time, not a long time. See you in 90. I don't think that bodes well for Alba Fire if she's on her own now. You know what they could do? They could add her to Chelsea's security team. Chelsea, Piper, and Alba. And it was only a matter of time before this happened. Giovanni Vinci. Someone brought him up in the live chat on Friday night when I was talking about this stuff, and he was not part of the initial cuts. And yeah, I made the comment, they may not be done yet. It's like JTG, he should probably keep his phone off. Giovanni Vinci has been released by WWE. This is the least surprising of all of the cuts. And it is very clear to me now that he was buried on purpose and they never had any intention of using him. There is no way that this was merely a case of, well, creative doesn't have anything for you, so sorry. No, this one was personal. And I know there's been rumors about him and something he may or may not have done behind the scenes that got him heat with Imperium, which is why he was pulled from the group. That's always been just a rumor that's gone around on social media. I have no idea if it happened or not, and I'm not going to get into the details of it because, again, that's all it is a rumor. But there are enough people talking about it that, I wanted to mention the fact that there is a potential reason. But it would explain why they kept Gunther and Kaiser together and very unceremoniously booted him from the group after they went through the trouble of reuniting them on the main roster. Because they had already broken up Imperium once before in NXT, and that's what led to Vinci being repackaged on his own as the wealthy Italian snob, which is the same gimmick they gave him on the main roster when they repackaged him there. But only after Triple H had reunited Imperium, right? When he was initially called up to the main roster, it was a part of Imperium. They were a trio again. And then they just split him off on his own again, and they repackaged him. So something happened, whatever it was. And let me just say, as much as I enjoyed Imperium as a trio, you look at Ludwig Kaiser. Ludwig Kaiser found a way to maximize his minutes, as they say, right? His ring introductions for Gunther became a big part of Gunther's presentation. His facial expressions, his mannerisms. Kaiser is very expressive. Vinci, on the other hand, was always just kind of there, right? He stood in the background. He didn't stand out in any real way. He just stood there with a stoic look on his face. Maybe he was told to be that way, or maybe that was his mistake, and he should have taken a cue from Kaiser and done more to make himself stand out. I like the guy, but I think that's a fair criticism. If you look back at his time with Imperium, he didn't do anything to stand out. So it's like, okay, they split him off from them again. Months go by, and they take the time, right, and the resources to produce these series of very fancy vignettes for him. He's driving sports cars and doing all these things, building to his return. And when he finally does return, what happens? He gets pinned by Apollo Crews, who never wins anything. Okay, if Apollo Crews played the lottery and there were only 10 numbers in the lottery and he played all 10 numbers, he would still lose, okay? He got pinned by Apollo Crews in 4 seconds. That was their way of reintroducing Giovanni Vinci to the world by making him look like a fucking geek in his first night in. And then Crews beat him again. This time it took 90 seconds. And that was the last time we saw him in the ring on TV. All that hype, all that build for 2 matches that he lost. And after that, he was relegated to dark match duty, where he lost every single one of those matches too. And look at the list of people they jobbed him out to. Baron Corbin, Apollo Crews, Luke Gallows. You're going to tell me they didn't bury this guy on purpose? that it wasn't intentional, that he didn't run afoul of somebody behind the scenes. He did something. I'd love to know who he pissed off. But whatever he did, his fate was sealed and there was no coming back from it, which is really too bad because he's a talented wrestler. I knew that the minute I saw him the first time in the Cruiserweight Classic. I said, who the fuck is this guy? He didn't even look like a cruiserweight. I mean, he wasn't like a tall guy, but there was just something about his build or whatever. He didn't look like a cruiserweight, but he's flying around the fucking ring. I go, holy shit. But he was never going to be higher than middle of the card at best. But he would have been a solid addition to the U.S. title picture on SmackDown. He could have been built up as a credible mid-card heel. You know, the way that back in the day you had a heel like the Model, Rick Martel, and people like that. He could have been that on the SmackDown roster. And even if they didn't have a spot for him on SmackDown, you can't tell me that men's division right now in NXT could not use someone like him. They could have made him useful in any number of ways. But instead, politics gets in the way, and now he's gone. I would love to know the real story one day of what this fucking guy did to deserve what he got, because it must have been a whopper. Another complete waste of talent. Speaking of Luke Gallows, he and Karl Anderson have joined the list, and they too are gone once again from WWE. The Good Brothers are no more. This is the second time they've been dumped. It's like they reconciled with their ex-wife and she took them back, and then she just dumped them again. The same week that AJ Styles returned to TV, no less. What a kick in the balls. But they had not been on SmackDown since July. They had been spending most of their time more recently on NXT, but that was months ago. Anderson had surgery for a torn rotator cuff and a partially torn labrum. That was back at the beginning of November. So that's like a 6 to 9 month layoff. So he's actually out injured right now, and they fired him, which is super shitty. Like, it's bad enough they fired him for the second time, like they did Samoa Joe, but to fire the guy while he's out hurt, and he got hurt on your watch. He got hurt in your ring. He's sitting at home, and he finds out that he lost his job, right? That's real scummy. There's no defending WWE on that. And it's a weird one because it's not something they really do anymore. I mean, I don't want to say they haven't fired people before when they were out hurt. They absolutely have, right? They fired Test many years ago when he was out recovering from spinal fusion surgery. They fired Dawn Marie famously while she was pregnant, which is what led to her suing them for wrongful termination. So they've been scummy before about it, but that was a long time ago. I was surprised they even brought these two back, to be honest with you, in the first place. That was a Triple H move to bring them back. What was that, in 2022, I think? That was right around the time Triple H first took over the book. But I had no real expectations for their return, and you can see why. They hardly did anything. After Vinci, you know, this is the second least surprising of all the cuts to me, outside of the timing of it on Karl Anderson, which there's really no excuse for. Paul Ellering and the authors of Pain are all gone, which spells the end of the Final Testament with Karrion Kross and Scarlett now back on their own. That spells the end of 3 tag teams, AOP, the Good Brothers, and the Unholy Union. None of whom were really being featured anyway, but that's 3 teams just gone right there. This one was even weirder than Triple H bringing back Anderson and Gallows. I never understood why he brought back AOP. I never got it. They added nothing to the tag team division. He never gave them any real kind of monster push when he brought them back or anything like that. Like, he brought them back and they were immediately relegated to the background. You know, Ellering has been around forever. He's a veteran that, you know, that Triple H worked with in NXT. And I'm sure he respects him and really just wanted to give the guy a job. Right? That's all that was. He wanted to give him a job, and he's also kind of tied at the hip with AOP. So when rumors started circulating about a possible AOP return, I figured Ellering would probably come along for the ride, and he did. But Ellering didn't do anything. He barely got any time to speak. And I know he's older, but surely you could use someone like him to help cut promos for AOP or any number of people who might be able to use it. But to do that, AOP would need to be featured on TV on a regular basis, and they weren't, which rendered Paul Ellering obsolete. Cedric Alexander is gone. He made the announcement in a post on social media Friday. He said, "Thank you for the last 8.5 years. Being a professional wrestler has been a dream of mine since I could form memories, and I will continue to do so until the good Lord says otherwise. Hashtag see you in 90. There were reports a few months ago that he had re-signed with the company sometime early last year. So unless he signed a 1-year deal, which I seriously doubt, it would appear they released him early. It's like Anderson and Gallows, their first time with the company. They had just re-signed. They had signed new 5-year contracts, only for WWE to turn around and cut them, a few months later, I think. Which just serves as a reminder that it doesn't matter how long your deal is that you sign, the company has all the power. Like, you're not really signing a 5-year contract. They're signing you to keep you away from everybody else for 5 years. But they can let you go whenever they damn well please. They have all the power. It's all very one-sided, but that's how it's always been. Cedric's a talented guy. He'll do well on the indies. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be thinking Hurt Syndicate in AEW. And yes, that would be a natural fit, to get the original band back together since all the other members are already there. MVP, Bobby Lashley, Shelton Benjamin. But there was a very public spat many years ago with Tony Khan and Big Swole, who was married to Cedric, when she left AEW. Things were said, and they were well documented at the time. I talked a lot about it. And I know that was many years ago, but I don't know if time has healed those wounds yet. I don't know that he is going to be so eager to go sign there. I mean, maybe he will. Right? If he's open to going there and Tony Khan is open to having him, then the Hurt Syndicate makes all the sense in the world. And this one actually happened months ago, but we only learned about it this week. Duke Hudson is gone from NXT. Real name Brendan Vink. He was actually up on Raw with that name when the pandemic started. And they were doing those shows at the Empty Performance Center. It was where he and Shane Thorne became MVP's newest associates. And that only lasted a few weeks before they got sent down to NXT. And after that, he went through a few different gimmicks before settling on the Chase University stuff. They broke up Chase U several months ago, so it was probably not long thereafter that they cut him. He finally found something with the Chase U stuff that worked. I'm not even sure why they ended Chase U. I know I haven't been keeping up week to week with all the NXT stories for a while now. I haven't been following the careers of all the Chase U members, but they were a popular act on the show, and I don't think the members have really done much of anything since then, right? They fed them to Ridge Holland after that to get Ridge ready to challenge Trick Williams for the NXT Championship, and that was that. I don't think the Chase U gimmick had legs on the main roster any more than I think the Tony D'Angelo gimmick does. Not for more than a short period of time, anyway. But it was perfect for NXT. I think Hudson could have ended up in a mid-card role on the main roster if they ever called him up, but I didn't see him going any higher than that. And evidently neither did Triple H because he never called him up, right? He could have called him up months ago. He didn't want to. I saw the video he posted this week on social media where he was interviewing himself, but it was like 2 different versions of himself. I don't know if it's going to be part of a series of videos. I thought it was well done. It was very well put together. He'll land on his feet somewhere soon enough. So those are the 11 names that we know of so far, one shy of a dozen. And this man wasn't released, but he is going to be gone for a while. And it makes me wonder if the timing of his injury was rather fortuitous, because if he was healthy, he may well have ended up on that list with all the other names I just mentioned. Apollo Crews, he tore his pec in that match that he had on Smackdown a few weeks ago with Johnny Gargano and had surgery this week. So that's at least 6 months out right there. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but I went back and I watched the match, and you can clearly see, like, midway through, he starts grabbing at his chest like he knows something is wrong, but he just kept going. He wrestled a few more minutes, and he won that match. He won that match also. So a cruel twist of fate in that he never gets to wrestle on TV. And he finally does, and he wins a match, but he gets hurt, and now he's going to be gone for most of the year. That torn pec may have just saved his job. Karl Anderson notwithstanding, right? The Apollo Crews thing, that just happened. Like, even I don't think they would fire the guy 2 weeks after he got hurt. 2 months? Maybe. But not 2 weeks. But one thing to watch for, and I got an email about this from Mick, who was thinking along the same lines. He asked about TNA being a potential landing spot for some of the released talents. And would they want to go work for a company with ties to WWE with the hope that it might help in leading to a return there down the road? Might make things a little bit easier. Or would they avoid TNA knowing, of their affiliation with WWE? And since WWE didn't want them, maybe they're a little bitter about it, and they would rather go work somewhere else. And to that, I say this. At the end of the day, these people need to work. They need to make money. And if AEW is not interested in them, or they don't want to go to AEW because they don't want to just be another body on the roster, and that would include Ring of Honor because Tony Khan owns Ring of Honor. So if that's not an option for them, they're not going to say no to an opportunity to work for TNA just because they do business with WWE. Most of them, if WWE came calling, most of the 11 people on that list, if WWE came calling to give them a job again, would take the job and go back. So you can go work for TNA and make a living and be on TV. And even if WWE doesn't want to bring you back, right, it's not a bad place to be. Or best case scenario, you go work for TNA, you up your value, right? You stay on television, you're visible, you do well. And WWE eventually does bring you back, maybe in a year or two, right? I don't see any of these people avoiding TNA, though, just because of the WWE connection. WWE does not own TNA, at least not yet. They don't have control over the hiring decisions that TNA makes. So I don't think the WWE connection to TNA hurts these people in any way. It can only help.